So I do appreciate I'm starting a whole session here on the really light, happy, upbeat topic of security. So apologies, but I guess the good news is it'll all be an upward trajectory from here. So yeah, really what I wanted to do today was just share our experiences of what we're seeing on RCS. You know, RCS has gone from being one of those things that, you know, year after year after year, we've seen projections of a great hockey stick curve. You know, it's finally here. You know, I'm getting RCS messages on my phone. I'm sending RCS messages. First time I did that, I think I was actually quite more surprised than anything. And so what we're doing is really just sharing what are people doing, particularly from a security perspective with RCS. So, first off, before we do that, though, I was introduced as ENEA. I'm guessing probably pretty much everyone doesn't know who ENEA are. To be honest, we didn't know who ENEA were until we got acquired. We actually were founded in 1968. We actually, in our basement in our office in Sweden, have a terminal where we received the very first email in Sweden. The technology that I think actually ended up picking up. So showed that we were at least on the right tracks there as services. But really the key thing is throughout the last 5 years, we've acquired quite a portfolio of companies. So we do things like entitlement servers, we do traffic management, DPI control, and we acquired Adaptive Mobile, which is really one of the main providers of messaging security. So what I'm going to be sharing today is based upon what we're really seeing in our customers, and particularly for Africa, we're deployed in about 18 different operators, 16 countries. So we've got a lot of eyes on and experience of issues here, not just general theoretical topics. So, putting that into numbers, we're actually covering over 100 different networks, got about a quarter of the world protected, 2.4 billion subscribers. And the other thing is, this has gone from being sort of theory to being front page news. I mean, when we set up our business 20 years ago, we were having to very much do a what if. People might be using their phones for personal data. You know, what if somebody put a virus on there? Nowadays, the mainstream media is continually covering stories about how people are being compromised because, as we all know, our daily lives are utilizing telecoms as the glue for every service. You know, healthcare, financial, retail, commerce, all of these services are utilizing the mobile, the connectivity infrastructure. And because we've got these different ecosystems all sandwiched together, that creates compromise points for attackers. They're able to exploit anywhere where there's a boundary on that. So what we're going to be exploring is 4 areas of that. First off, scams, spams, phishing. You know, we've probably all seen those messages, probably got a few on our phone ourselves. But also there are other areas. Grey routes and AIT are issues that affect the ecosystem that take money out of the flow. And that causes problems because, first off, it means that companies aren't being either appropriately compensated or paid for what they're doing. But also, secondly, it erodes the confidence of businesses in using that connectivity infrastructure. And if they don't have confidence, then they're not utilizing new services, and it affects what subscribers can receive as services. And then lastly, there's inappropriate content. I mean, it's great that anyone can be contacted, but there's increasingly more regulation, more requirements to make sure that that interaction is being done in a way that is safe and secure. Because if that doesn't happen, subscribers lose confidence. And once they've lost confidence in a particular service or an app on their phone, they won't come back. They'll look for alternatives and they stay there. So how can we help make this better and safer and more secure? So RCS. RCS has been pitched as being a more secure solution than text messaging, SMS. But can attacks happen? You know, are they the same? Are they different? What does it actually look like? And one of the key starting points is that RCS is often associated with end-to-end encryption. So, you know, just like in the web in the early days where people were taught to look for the padlock on a website, RCS as a consumer-to-consumer service is exactly the same. There is encryption from one device to the other. Almost impossible for anyone to be involved in the middle of that, to either intercept it, to alter it, to read it, to tamper with it, to change it. So, the advantages are confidentiality, integrity, the authentication that means you know that you're talking with the person who they say they are, and also what's called forward secrecy and post-compromise security, which is saying even if somebody tampered with one message, it doesn't mean to say that they will then be able to tamper with every other message. So absolutely, it looks like an absolute win. It's a safe, secure channel. However, what it doesn't do is it doesn't change the behavior or the personality of the person who is actually sending that message. Yes, the connection is secure, but what about the person who sent that message? It also removes the ability for a lot of people to be able to do anything. As a result of it being inside this sealed, secured, encrypted tunnel, it means the folks who used to provide security to that no longer have the ability to keep people safe. So they can't look at something and go, oh, hold on a minute, this is bad. It also means that if a device itself is compromised, if somebody's downloaded an app on there that's doing bad things, we can't tell if that's the case, we can't notify the person, and we can't stop that device doing more bad things to everybody else in their contact book. So what's user experience actually like with RCS? I mean, that was a set of bullet points of theory. This is a screenshot of my phone. I mean, I always like to say, what's it look like, not only from a user, but what is my personal experience? I'm on Android. It's got a function that says if I ever receive a message that Google thinks is suspicious, it will automatically put it into a spam folder. So you can see, a little hard to work out the dates, but since the 3rd of April to, in fact, actually 11 a.m. as of a week ago when I did my slides, there was about, 15 different spam messages that came in. So these were automatically detected by my phone, put in the spam folder. When you look at them, though, what's interesting is, like this top one here, came over RCS. In fact, this came from, anybody know where country code 372 is? Yeah, somewhere in Europe anyway. And we got the message. So spam messages are getting through. If we look at the next message down, not only is it RCS, but it's encrypted end to end. So what you can see is that spammers are utilizing the fact that you've got these great secure channels to say, hey, I can now reach more people with less protection being put in place to stop me reaching victims. The other key thing is every single one of those messages on my phone those spam messages is now being sent on RCS. Spammers are not using SMS anymore if they don't need to. If they know they can reach somebody on RCS, because it's encrypted, it means that those defenses that used to exist don't apply. That's really attractive for a spammer. We're also seeing other techniques. RCS is group chat, so you can now start to do things like group naming. So what that means is you can send a message that makes it look like a legitimate brand. So it's coming from an alphanumeric sender. And what they're doing is they're sending out a spam message, adding somebody to the group, so the message appears on their phone, then removing them from the group, then adding somebody else into the group. So technically, they're only almost sort of sending one message, but they're using group chat as a way of getting higher volumes. So techniques like looking at ratio of connection or how many messages are being sent, they don't apply in an RCS environment. We're also seeing grey routes on RCS, and I would say this is probably one of the bigger threats that is going to face our ecosystem. Because A2P traffic, monetized traffic, is a valuable source of income for many operators. By using RCS, it becomes invisible, it becomes unmonetized. And so this is a case where somebody is sending a legitimate Microsoft 2FA message, but again, they're using group chat, so you've got that banner, so the user sees Microsoft, but it's not monetized by either the terminating aggregators or the operators, so they've lost that revenue source. We know RCS has rich media that you can attach to it. This is an example of where text is put into an image. So the key thing now with a mobile device is if you send somebody a picture, the phone itself will automatically read the content of an image and say, is there a web link, is there a phone number? And if there is, it decodes it out of the image. So all you need to do is hold your finger over that part of the image and it will automatically either call or follow that web link. That creates a security issue because typical messaging firewalls are used to reading text, not analyzing images. So it requires things like advanced image analysis defenses now. We're seeing in terms of appropriate content, people doing promotion of maybe products that are not allowed to be offered in particular markets. So, for example, promotion of firearms or weapons. And then we're seeing people sending out messages associated with narcotics. So, there's a lot of benefits with RCS, but we have to make sure it's a clean, safe, secure channel when it's being used. In terms of what we're seeing right here in the African continent, the usual examples of spam, trying to get people to take products and services. Scams continue to grow. I mean, some of the key things is you'll see all of these, they're typically using URL shorteners, so a nice short link there for people to click on. And then, phishing continues again to be a main issue here. Just trying to get people to act with an urgency there. It's like, hey, we found your phone. Even if people are looking on their phone going, well, I know it's not my phone, they're going to be curious. Well, whose phone is it? Where did you find it? They're going to click those links and get compromised. And then to get really technical on you, there's a whole range of additional characteristics. I mean, they're getting so creative. We had one country that said, right, you know what? To try and keep people safe, we're going to stop any URL be included in any message. So nobody can send links in text messages. Immediately, literally within hours, the spammers had just said, just Google or just search for these phrases. So no link needed. They poisoned the search engines to take them to a website. They're very, very good at adapting to social techniques like that. Dropping things like spaces into a URL. It looks the same. People can type phoneline.casino in, but it's not technically a URL. They're putting in things like using extended character sets. Again, most people are just reading Latin character sets. So the creativity and the ingenuity of scammers and spammers is right up there. They are making money for every single victim that they can get to click. So when we look at security of the ecosystem then, phones first off, can get malware. The other thing is that we see a spate of offers where people say, if you download this application, we will pay you for using up your unused service packages. So people go, you know what, I've got 1,000 messages or whatever it is now a month. I only ever send 20 or 100. Why shouldn't I resell those other 900? So these apps make use of that. I mean, that's an unapproved or sometimes illegal behavior. But the trouble is the users have no ability to enforce or control what is being sent from their handset, and most often it is damaging and bad. So we've got cases where the devices themselves are being compromised by the users, typically unknowingly, not thinking through the implications of that. We've got SIM banks. I mean, increasingly, whilst that was seen as an old approach, it's coming back to fashion because of RCS and that end-to-end encryption. Emulators. You can download Android and run it as an instance on a PC. So in fact, that was exactly what we saw in some of those early examples. And then the other aspect is because with RCS, you can send traffic from an associated device. So for example, if you've got a tablet as well as a phone, you can link the two things together and send from your tablet. We're seeing scammers try to gain credentials from the operators, so your username and login password, that will then enable them to send from your account, even though they don't have access to your physical device. So when you're seeing services like RCS or other messaging services being launched, think through the implications of who can access how and where. And also, in terms of fighting against this, there's a continual evolution and attempts to try and close the loopholes. Google, for example, said, right, we're going to restrict that RCS messages cannot be sent from any device that has been rooted. So anyone that's tried to load their own version of Android on there or something that is enable somebody to do something quite, often for legitimate reasons, more flexibly. So they're going to check for that. Unfortunately, within hours, that techniques were discovered to say, okay, they're checking for this, just use a different value. It's one of those things, it can take months to try and put a defense in place that can be overcome within hours. So it's an asymmetric game in this. You've got to keep on your toes to try and work out how to defend. So really, when we look at the threats, they are all present today on RCS. So it's about very much making sure that you've got an approach that says, let's not assume it's safe. We can solve this, we can address this, we can manage it, but let's not default assume that everything is fixed, everything is better. And I think also when we look then, that was frankly just looking at the person-to-person interaction. When we look at the business interaction, the RBM ecosystem, we've got an increasing number of players. We've got the Jibe clouds, we've got the CPaaS with their RBM infrastructure. What's interesting is you look at the different players and the typical responsibility points. And what we're now saying is that local regulators, they were, or still are, the people who are enforcing the requirements. People are, by virtue of having spectrum and license, they are, the operators, are the people the regulators will go to. But effectively, RCS and RBM are an over-the-top service. And with this encryption, people are losing the ability to deliver the obligations of their license of protecting users in there. So we're seeing an interesting case now where there's actually now more obligation on the CPaaS, on the CSPs to provide that inspection of content, because really effectively this is the only point of control and inspection before the traffic is delivered. So the operators are still going to see customer complaints. They'll still receive reports, but they will lose more and more the ability to deliver enforcement unless they're putting things like control gateways in place. So again, I think if you're involved in that transport of RBM traffic, start to talk to terminating operators and understand what is their security stance. Not all networks will be the same, but understand what their security position is, because they will probably increasingly start pushing that responsibility back up the chain to the CSPs. So in terms of closing on this, the challenge is, this responsibility, it is changing. The ecosystem is not going to be the same in 2025 as it has been for the last 15 years. Who solves these problems will change. Encryption, it is not a synonym of being secure. Just because things are encrypted end-to-end does not mean to say it's safer. Regulations are going to continue growing, given the fact that we can have more of a rich engagement there. But it's going to come down to know your customer. I think we will see more and more and more obligations on CSPs, particularly with RBM traffic, about who is the sending enterprise. Do you know exactly what campaigns they are sending, how they're interacting with their customers, and maintaining that? Not just in terms of are they a good company, but do they themselves have good security policies to avoid their own infrastructure from being compromised? So through all of that, we can help you. It's something to go in prepared. We can help deliver that safe, secure experience. We can keep customers opening their inbox. We can keep them reading messages. We can keep them clicking on messages to make sure they're still using these services. It's an exciting future with RCS, but let's make sure we go in safe, we go in secure. Thanks.
Q&A. Okay. Thanks, Simeon. So I think we have a few minutes, so I thought we might open up to some question and answer, quick Q&A. If anybody has any question at this point, but I do have some questions for you, actually. So the last couple of slides, you mentioned that us users have a role in RCS security, and I mean not just the regulator, the carrier, the whole ecosystem. We, as the use in terms of reporting the spam, can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the big changes we've seen from a usability perspective over the last 2 years now has been that, in fact, if ever you've got a message coming in from somebody who's not in your contacts, and typically if it contains like an action, like a phone number or a URL, you'll get a little pop-up. Have folks seen that where it says like report spam? That is a really important function. So please do use that, because what that does is it creates a report that goes to several people. First off, it goes to Google and Apple. So, I showed you my spam folder on my phone. It enables that to work more effectively. It also goes to the mobile operator so they can see where the complaints are actually coming from, because they get to see the source numbers. But it also comes to security companies like us, so we can use that as a form of intelligence to apply new controls, again, to be able to handle that spam. And I would say, right now we're seeing a lot of people use that report spam function almost as a sort of, okay, thanks, I've seen it function. All sorts of legitimate messages are getting reported. But we will start to see, I think, an enrichment of that capability. So it won't just be spam, but we'll see things like opt-out and consent controls also come in there. So yeah, really important function. And it's also really helpful to understand things like consent. Who's really truly matching and tracking their Know Your Customer.
Okay. And my follow-up question on that is, so you mentioned about regulators playing a role and operators. What are their challenges today in kind of trying to regulate the RCS and the RBM messaging environment?
Yeah, so when things were the good old days of SMS, it was quite straightforward. SMS was a channel that the operators themselves could control. They could put a firewall in place, they could see all the traffic that was flowing, and if it was something they felt was not appropriate to their requirements or that user or their business needs, they could control and block it and stop it. They've lost that with RCS. So I think this is where there is going to be a change in dynamic, but it's going to take time. The regulators will still keep putting pressure, I think, on operators to start with, not realizing that control has been lost. I think then there'll be a bit of flailing around and trying to work out who's got responsibility. If it's come from another operator, I think, at best that can happen will just be about disconnecting that one subscriber that was sending it. But increasingly, we see that the traffic of greatest concern will come from the CSPs where it is enterprise accounts, which is why we really stress Know Your Customer will become more and more and more important.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Simeon. Appreciate the insight and the advice, what we have to do next to secure the RCS environment. I know you guys, I think we have the expo area there, so if anybody wants to talk to you, you're around until 4-ish.
Yeah, I'm joined by a couple of colleagues. So yeah, anybody who wants to be really lighthearted by security, I think the windows are sealed, aren't they? So, but yeah, always happy to talk stories.
Okay, so we will actually have another RCS topic, and hopefully it's a bit more vibrant outlook to what
it's okay, I'll take that, yeah.
But yeah, so we will have another panel, but for now, I think I will invite Ansel to introduce the next session. Thank you, Simeon. Yes.
Thanks.